The content discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial or mortgage advice. Always consult with a licensed professional before making any decisions regarding mortgages or financial matters.
Welcome to the Canadian Mortgage Show. Here are mortgage professionals Alex Pang and Alex Shanks to cut through the BS and educate Canadians on all things mortgages and real estate.
Welcome to episode 23 of the Canadian Mortgage Show. Alex Pang here, along with my co-host Alex Shanks. Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good here, Alex. We got our first snowfall. I feel like maybe it's actually winter time now, but we're going to be going into springtime soon.
That much, and up until probably this week for us, it was pretty dry. We haven't seen any snowfall at all, but we did get our first big dump in quotations of snow, like 5 centimeters. And our area in Surrey, kids got a snow day on Monday, which, I mean, not really that necessary, but the kids loved it.
Oh, I feel like the teachers were like praying for it and just saying, we need to have a day off because that's on Monday for my kids. There was probably more snow on Monday. And then Tuesday, there was a day off. And I'm like, this is a little crazy.
For those of you who are watching us video, I'm wearing some sort of wool cardigan. If you're wondering, it's just really cold on the West Coast. The rest of Canada, you guys are making fun of us. But man, if you aren't out here, wet cold is a real thing. So like anywhere from 0 to 5 degrees, it's cold. It gets into your bones. So I've experienced it. I've been out to Alberta, to Edmonton, and it was minus 10. And it was like, this isn't cold. So the dry cold is different from the wet cold.
Yeah, it depends on how cold it is. But yeah, I was up a mountain skiing on the weekend. It was cold. It got real cold. I think like -15, -20 with the wind chill.
Plus it
wasn't so great for the kids.
And that's being on the West Coast. So that's a wet cold too. So you had to cover your whole face and squeeze that hood so that like nothing touches the air. We got a big show today.
Yeah, exactly. Big show, and I'm gonna name the show here for everyone in a second. There was lots of news. We talked about the last pod there that the Trumps were the tariffs were coming in. Yeah, they did come in, and they've also been delayed. And we're gonna talk about that. This is the tariff show. Obviously, we're gonna talk a lot about the tariffs here today, Alex. But we know that this has a big effect on our entire economy, so we do need to dive into it.
Is nervous, keeping an eye on what's going on. It almost reminds me of how the uncertainty of COVID when it first came, like keeping an eye on what's happening. What is this going to mean for me? What's going to happen with interest rates? What's going to happen in the housing market? All that stuff. North America, especially in Canada, where we are worried about it. We're thinking about it all the time. I don't know how much Americans are thinking about it. Both countries should be concerned about it. All right, let's get started. Do you want to start off?
Yeah, let's do it. So the tariffs came in on Saturday is what they were meant to come in on February 1st there. And the first one was President of Mexico. They were actually able to get a hold of Mr. Old Donald Trump and delay it. And it really seems like all they were talking about is securing the border. And that's what Trump said that it was all about. So obviously that's what Mexico said is, hey, we're going to send 10,000 National Guards to secure the border. The weird thing is I think that they were already meant to be doing that. It wasn't like some new thing from what I can hear on the news. Is like both Canada and Mexico said that they were going to be like bringing more troops to the borders. But hey, it made Trump feel better that he gave them a 30-day delay.
Friday we were all expecting, okay, the tariffs are coming in. And even we haven't heard anything from Trudeau at all. And we would only hear from Danielle Smith and even Doug Ford, Alberta and Ontario premiers, fighting for essentially our country. They were our acting prime ministers for a little bit. But all of a sudden, Trudeau came in on Monday and had a talk with Trump and basically staved off the tariffs by 30 days. And he's also done the same too, pledging 110,000 soldiers or National Guard to secure the border, pledging $200 million to fight organized crime and fentanyl smuggling. And he pledged to appoint a fentanyl czar. What do you mean? What do you think he means by that?
I don't really, that one, I've watched the czar on Netflix. Maybe I don't fully understand what the czar means, but I thought like czar's like ruler. And was this going to be like the fentanyl ruler? They get to dole out who gets the fentanyl, the drug smuggling and stuff. It seems weird. And I am very happy to see that we are actually going to crack down on fentanyl. That is something that I think in Vancouver has just been running rampant. people that do drugs, maybe the first time, it is such a scary thing that you could try something and you're dead instantly. And it's something that the government does have control over because they are the main supplier of fentanyl. It's
Yeah, I
then the
heard.
drug
I
people
was
get their hands
listening to
on
another
it.
pod, and I guess the idea behind fentanyl is from a medical usage. Is it meant to be more of a numbing your pain kind of thing, or yeah, a pain medication? But the pharmaceutical grade of fentanyl is so good that some nurses are saying, or doctors are even saying, don't let this get out on the street because people will love it or something like that. So I guess that's a real thing. So I guess what they
Yeah.
meant by the fentanyl
Yeah,
czar is
it's
maybe the big kahuna that's in charge of trying to crack down on the fentanyl. Like it's almost like your FBI director or CIA director and such. Another thing is that Trudeau pledging to designate drug cartels as terrorist organizations. And you know what? I agree with that. That they are essentially terrorist organizations. They do
yeah.
terrorize our local
Oh,
communities and such.
that's it. Yeah, that's I already thought that's what they were classified as. And again, it's what did I read? There was something about the amount of inspections that we do, let's say on our shipping containers. We barely look at any of our stuff. We have no specialized equipment to scan these things. In the US, everything gets scanned. When stuff travels across on train, there's zero inspection. Zero inspection. It's like, how is that even possible? Like, how do we allow that to happen? And is it because they don't really want it to be looked at?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
We
Like
never
we
like
watch
putting
in
the 12 hat
movies
on.
that they make enough money to pay off people in government in high places and like security and whatever to bat a blind eye, and all these things happen, and even car theft and cars being shipped abroad. I think I'm hearing this a lot more in Ontario, but cars being
Yep.
stolen, and the next thing you know it, the car is on a ship on
Oh,
the way to India or wherever, the Middle East, and something like that.
which should have been the easiest thing, being like, how, hey, I don't have this on my log. Why is there an extra vehicle here? That's stuff that we can easily crack down on. And that's where I hope that does benefit from here. Obviously, the other stuff, Trump, I still feel like even after this, there is going to be some sort of tariff. I don't think the tariffs are going away. Like he still wants more from it, but I also don't think he's realized like the backlash
Yeah.
that he will get from his own stipulants
Yeah, this
of
kind
it.
of
That's
got
an
me
interesting one.
thinking, like, was this like the threat of tariffs? Was it his plan all along? Is because really to bring Mexico and Canada to the table and to say that I'm really serious about this. And because you haven't treated the border seriously, I'm going to slap tariffs. And maybe
Yeah,
he didn't want to have to slap tariffs, but as a
yeah,
business person or someone that's negotiating, you have
yeah.
to show that you're willing to follow through, right, on your promise or your threat.
Let's say there was a video of him at a conference somewhere. This is before he was in power, as he was running and stuff, and he was just talking about tariffs, just saying, "Hey, you could bring 5% in. No one's really going to scoff at it. It's hey 25%, maybe someone." And in his eyes, what he was talking about is getting businesses to come to the U.S. What he wants is he wants more businesses in the U.S. And he's, hey, if I put a 50% tariff on it, that business is going to want to bring business and start doing it in the U.S. because they're not going to want to have to pay those taxes. And that's where it just gets scary when
Yeah,
a crazy
exactly.
guy
So I mean,
has some
it goes
crazy
to show,
power.
like, what's the next round of negotiations? Sure, we have a 30-day delay. So what's going to happen next? Like, I'm sure he's going to want more things. Other things could be like dairy, and we talked about auto parts, where when a car gets put together, parts
Yep.
move around between Canada and the US maybe 6 to 7 times before a car is actually put together. So something's crazy here.
It's
Military
crazy.
spending, we all know that as Canadians, we don't have much of a military. So we've been relying on US military, that part there, and banking regulations. He wants to allow US banks to operate in Canada. So we know that there are other banks, like Asian banks, like Chinese banks, but why not American ones? And I agree with that. Let's have some more competition. Like I've been on the soapbox about talking about airlines, cell phones, banking as well. Like we need to open up Canada to not be such a
Yeah, and I think it's fine having more banks come in, but like the funny thing is there is American banks in Canada. Like there's the big one is CTI Bank. That is an American bank and they're in Canada. And so like him saying it like, oh, there's no American banks. And there is. It's not in the same level of the banks that they have in the US, because there's 4,000 or 5,000 banks in the US. It's such a different ball game, and
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
think
what
he
he
even
means is
knows
like,
all the different types
so
of
there's
banks
some
there are.
American banks that operate in Canada, but I think what he's referring to is more in the retail space, like the big five in Canada, like the BMOs, RBCs, TDs, Scotias, CIBCs, and such. Like
Yeah.
you're hearing about the big banks in the States, Wells Fargo, Citi. Is Goldman Sachs a bank, or no? That's an investment firm. But you know what I'm saying? Like the bigger banks, Bank of America, to have a actual presence, to be a real player. Even from the cell phone, hey, I would love T-Mobile or AT&T to be in Canada. If it brings our cell phone rates down, that's amazing. Like it has come down since like the last couple of years, but it's still far, like there's still so much more to go.
Yeah. And that's where I just don't even know if the American banks want to be here, to be honest. Our regulations are harder, the way that we deal with money and businesses, unless they could come in and disrupt the market with how they do stuff in the US. Maybe that's a thing, but other than that, I don't think they'd even want to be here.
There are a couple of American companies that came in here and that failed, like Target came in. And I don't think like for Target's case, I think they had a bad strategy. They trying to sell stuff, like they didn't offer the same things as in the States when they opened up here. They were selling things that they thought Canadians would want, but they priced it way higher. And all we wanted as Canadians was the same deal. When we went to Target, you got like a t-shirt for $3.
Yeah.
That same kind of deal up here. Sure, like it might be more if you do the conversion, but that same kind of that niche up here, but they didn't. It was a totally different business model, and that's why it failed in Canada.
Yeah.
So
no, totally. And then obviously when the US, they hit us with the tariffs. Now it was 25% on most of the consumer goods, 10% on the energy. And so that was on the Saturday. What was it? Either on Sunday, I think Canada retaliated like instantly by slapping 25% on most of the red states, which like I think by Monday there was meant to be 155 billion of goods that were coming in that instantly would have been slammed by those tariffs. So of course, obviously like Canada bringing the stuff to the border, like that was part of it, but also it was like, hey, we're going to be taxing all your stuff as well. And Mexico also followed suit. They said, all right, if you're going through with this, we're going to be tariffing all yours. And this is why this tariff show is more called the tariff war
like
trade.
A lot of things happened even on the weekend. So we're going back in time now, like leading up to before the stay of execution, so to speak. So the BC Liquor Distribution Board vowed to stop buying liquor from the red states. And they even said over the weekend, like you would see pictures all over social that they have removed the American liquor from their shelves, and they would have labels saying buy Canadian, or you would see that in the grocery stores too. The grocery stores are actually labeling the products. This is Canadian, this is Canadian and stuff. It's almost, we're essentially drawing the line in the sand now.
And that's where I think, in Ontario, they said they were pulling all the alcohol off the shelves instantly. And then the big one, which Elon Musk he's pretty much in the government now. And they did have a big plan for Ontario. And they had $100 million contract that Doug Ford said we're ripping up with these tariffs and everything. And it's just funny. Again, Elon Musk probably in the ear of Trump at the same time saying, whoa, Kate, like we want to get some money, but hey, I don't want to be losing money here.
And to provide high-speed internet access to the rural areas, right, of Ontario, I believe. So Ford also declared a ban on all American companies from any provincial contracts until the whole tariffs are removed. Along with Daniel Smith, Doug Ford has to be like, you know what? Our federal government's not doing anything. I got to do something for my province. And so good on him. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's jump in. We got some tariff stuff. We are going to jump back into some tariff stuff. But we got to talk about Canada's GDP. Now, this is the big one. It dropped by 0.2% in November. Now, that was the largest decrease since November of 2023, when we know like rates were, I think, at the peak at that point. And that's 0.2%. God, the economy doesn't like that. If these tariffs came in, what was it? I think we're going to go down to 0.6 or 0.8 instantly is what they expected. That is just a massive downturn.
They're forecasting for a 0.2% decrease December as well. I have it as an increase, but I think that what they mean is more of a decrease. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. An increase to another
It's
0.2%.
not good.
Which again, and we're still in the positive area. You have to be in negative for a recession.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all know
we've been in
a
per capita recession for,
to me, there's no
like
doubt
a year
of
and a
that.
half now.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, again, if the tariffs, that they came back after this 30 days, that is going to put more pressure on the recession that's going to come. And I don't know. I don't know about you, Alex. I was fielding calls on the weekend, obviously, as the tariffs came in. It's scary for a lot of people figuring out what's going on with their mortgages. Do they have renewals coming up? I got other people messaging me saying, hey, I hear that variable rates are going to come down 6 times guaranteed. And that is because a BMO economist, Doug Porter, came out and said if these tariffs come in, the Bank of Canada is going to have to do 6 quarter-point cuts. Now, that's an economics point of view. That is not a guarantee. That does not mean that's going to happen. And that was all solely based on tariffs being implemented. On Monday, as soon as that happened, that completely changes the course of the narrative.
On top of that, by cutting rates 1.5% over the course of a year, this is almost like treating it like almost like a pandemic level response. Like we talked about in last week's episode where, man, could we see SEBA and CERB coming out again? Imagine this money flooding the market by the government, wanting to keep the economy going. Didn't we just go through this roller coaster 5 years ago and we're still dealing with the fallout of this and we're just coming out of it now? Do you want us to go through this again? Yeah. And then on top of that's going to sink our loonie even further. We've recovered a little bit since then. Yeah. Oh
God, the yo-yos of that. Yeah, it was insane. Down,
when the whole
up, down,
tariff
up.
thing was going to come down, our dollar went down to about 67 cents. And then as soon as we found the Trudeau negotiated delay for 30 days, the dollar's back up to 69, just under 70 cents. So we're still around there. But imagine this 1.5% cut that Doug Porter was forecasting. Should the tariffs continue all year? Yeah, we could see a loonie like 64 cents or even like the low 60s. Like, God forbid, even the 50s. That would be like bad.
I got people coming from the States, and I think there's a report out. If all you did was just buy the US, just the cash, cash that way, you would have had a 15% return from Canada to US. That's how much money it's been making compared to it. There's so many people coming from the US buying in Canada that are citizens here that were living there. They're just like, holy shit, my 300,000 is 465,000 in Canadian.
Good for Americans buying here, but not good for us as Canadians. So we have another economist, National Bank's economist, Stéphane Marion. He's calling for an emergency cut. Now, this is probably before the whole the 30-day delay. Yeah, he was calling for an emergency cut of 50 basis points.
Before
that's
the delay.
0.5% in response to the tariffs. And he was forecasting 25 basis point cuts in March and April too. That would bring the rates down 1%.
And that's for people to understand. By emergency, it means they just make an emergency one. Doesn't follow when the rate announcements in March and April, that would be hey, on February 15th, there's a rate cut.
It's almost like this outlook they were talking about month by month. This we already can see. Yeah, it's honestly, you're right. It is
it's day by day right now.
This was a few days ago, late last week. It's almost like last week's news already. This week we might have a different revision on the forecast, but it's important to keep an eye on the news and to keep an eye on, plug in with us because we have our eye on the market. I was talking to a client right before recording this pod. He was like, "Yeah, there's so much noise right now going on in the world, and it is depressing. But of course, you still got to live your life. Keep in mind that things are going on that's in the world that are out of control. We're here to navigate it, to help talk about it and how to best get through these tough times."
And that's right. The tough times does bring rates down. And the one thing we're seeing is we're starting to see rates on the insured side in the 3s again. We had those 2 months ago. The economy changed. We're like, oh crap, fixed are actually going up. Variable was still coming down. But again, good news on rates in some cases is very bad news for Canada. And that's why I saw people posting 6 rate cuts, emergency rate cut. You need to get into the housing market today. You're going to lose out. And it's just, if rates went down 0.5% in an emergency rate cut and then another 6 times, Like we're not worried about like low rates. Like that's people
Yeah.
not having jobs. There's
Oftentimes
no
where
houses being
like
bought.
bad news for Canada is good news for rates. Yes, as mortgage holders and us in the industry, we like low rates. To get to that point means
Yep.
financial Armageddon almost, where the whole industry, like the auto industry in Ontario, is
Yep.
going to get killed. Lumber industry in BC will get killed. Aluminum in Quebec, and every farmer in Canada is going to suffer. And there's going to be mass layoffs. And if you're in one of these vulnerable sectors, great that rates are lower. Yeah,
Your
it don't
low,
mean dick if you
yeah, your
don't if
low
you can't
rate doesn't
qualify
make
for a
up your
mortgage, or
payment.
even worse, if you have a mortgage, how are you going to pay it? And we've even seen too that the power of sale or foreclosure rates have gone up quite a bit in the past year or so. So yeah, there's always two sides to every coin, right?
Again, that's where I mean that it's so funny how the tune changes. When people first thought these tariffs were going to come in, inflation was going up, rates were going to the moon. And then again, that's just what the news was pushing. Now it's more pushing, hey, rates are going to go down. This is what's going to happen. And it's taking a step back, breathing, not reacting to the exact moment. Because we have to figure out what's going to happen in the landscape. There could have been people that broke mortgages on that day because they were so scared that rates were going to increase. They could have locked themselves in at say 4.5%, where today they now could be looking at 4%. You do want to take a chance, breathe, look at what
down in
everything
the
looks
States,
like.
they had their own little rate announcement as well. And as we all expected, they did hold their key lending rate at the 4.25% to 4.5%. So this marks their first meeting without a rate cut since July. So we were expecting that the U.S. economy has been a little bit stronger than Canada, and that they weren't going to make any cuts. By that means, since we have been in the rate cutting cycle, that kind of continues to hurt our dollar, and that kind of we've been anticipating this for quite some time now, and it's just coming to fruition now.
Yeah, we were out of parity already. Like we're 1.5% different already, and there is a chance that we're going to keep going down. To me, it's not going to be aggressive rate cuts, but it's where we could just widen that gap, and that's going to add stress to our markets.
Going back to how that BMO economist was calling for 1.5% rate cuts, like in the beginning of this year when we were talking about where rates are going to be, how I was anticipating without this whole Trump thing in the air, probably around 0.5%, 0.75% cuts on a normal, like how we're recovering and such. I'm revising that now with a whole uncertainty. Maybe we could see conservatively 1% more in cuts. Let's take that from the BMO economist to what we were anticipating. 1% is a reasonable expectation conservatively. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That will change, of course, if week to week we hear these news and things come on a daily basis. And
The big one that I really feel that everyone, like, all that really matters is like the 25% on goods. Like, it would hurt. It's the biggest one is what happens on oil and gas. That is really what runs the world. We all think that it doesn't, but everything runs on oil and gas. All of our shipping costs are that. Everything is based on that. And if something happens there, inflation 100% would go up. Rates would have to go up. And that's where I feel like when I talk to people, it's, hey, we need to pay attention where the tariffs are at. I don't think that's going to put pressure on interest rates. But if we hear, hey, gas is going up, like oil's going to go up, like we have a problem.
We would see big rate cuts. Essentially, I don't know if it's going to happen the same way, but money would flood the market because we're trying to stimulate the economy. And then with revisionist history, people start buying stuff, which causes inflation. And then they would have to jack up interest rates again. So it's almost like that kind of yo thing. That's how we could totally see how that being played out, where we dropped rates, but then we dropped it too much, and now things are crazy. Now we got to stop it. So yeah, I can totally see that happening.
That's where I feel like the only way I feel that it can be cut aggressively is mass layoffs. That's, to me, the only way it's possible, because then there's people, even if they get a stimulus check, like, they're not going to be able to go and spend a bunch of money. And that's where, but again, we're talking about like the variable rates, the Bank of Canada, the Fed and everything. But we have been seeing the 5-year bond yield, which is how our fixed rate mortgages are based on. And that thing has just been going down. Like we were up at 3.28 in January. And oh my God, I didn't like checking in on the bond every single morning, Alex. I don't know about you, but every time I looked at it, I'm like, oh man, these fixed rates are just going to keep going up. And we're now seeing that down. It hit 2.5%. I think we're sitting more like 2.65, 2.7.
Yeah. Over the course
lenders
of
are starting to drop their fixed rates.
Week or so, we're seeing fixed rates go down probably about a 0.2% ish, 0.2 to 0.25% ish. Yeah, it has come down.
I find the ones, I don't know about you've noticed, Alex, it's mainly, I always find the ones that are most aggressive at front is the monoline lenders. And so for everyone, like a monoline lender is just solely a mortgage company. That's all they do is mortgages. They don't have bank accounts. They're the first ones to really aggressively cut on that insured side. And I feel like they've been hurting. The banks have just been destroying them as of late. And I feel like they're jumping on this right now to try and get some of that market share. I would say as long as we don't have too much volatility, I think next week, the following week, like banks are going to follow suit and we'll start seeing their rates lower.
I could very well see fixed rates go into the threes this year. We are hovering for the short-term fix, we're hovering around 4.25 to 4.5 on the shorter term. And yeah, it looks like, hey, could maybe in as early as 6 months from now, we could see a 375, 399 handle to it on a shorter term fixed. Probably insured right now, but it could very well cross over into conventional as well. So even this has been my theme for the last 3 or 4 months.
Totally.
Anybody who's in a high fixed rate mortgage they had to take out during the last couple of years. Now that number has dropped to like, if you're in like maybe around 5.5% now, as long as there's a 0.75% 0.75% difference of what you have and what the current is, and if you break out of it, we can still save you money even at a 0.75% difference. I would usually thought it was a 1% difference, but 0.75, I've calculated with some clients, you can still see some savings there. So if you're in that kind of boat in the 5.5% range, talk to a mortgage broker, talk to us. We can run some numbers and save you guys some money.
Yeah, it just depends on the term. I've talked to a few people that have come because I've helped other people save money. And then I get people that are coming and they're at 6.25, and they're like super excited, but they only have 7 months, 8 months left on their term. And it just doesn't make sense because yes, you're getting today's rate, but what if rates keep going down? And so that they go into a tracker and hey, if something looks different and rates are going up, hey, 100% they'd be the first people to be called. But right now, there's still too much opportunity that in 6 months they could have a lower rate.
I'm seeing most of the savings are people who have about 1.5 years left on their term. So anything like, there's someone that's
totally
also that I'm looking at is 6.25%, but they have about 14 months left. Still looking at saving them about $1,500, but yeah, like I can see that if your term is less than a year left, probably you're not going to save. Like you will save, but that penalty is going to swallow up the savings to make it not really worth it. Yeah.
And it only makes sense if you're taking variable, because if you take a fix, it's like, hey, I took that 4.25 now, but shit, 6 months later I'm at 4%.
So the idea is to take variable,
you're not going to be able to get it lower.
Ride the wave down with prime rate going down, and then lock in when the bond market, again, that market which governs fixed, is at its lowest point, which is 6 months, 3 to 6 months before the Bank of Canada and the Fed is done cutting. And so we've initially anticipated to be late summer, early fall. That's a moving window. We'll keep an eye and inform everybody when that window is going to open up. All right, so we need to move on.
Now, what are we doing, Alex? Are you done buying anything US? Are you doing any trips to the US? Like, what's your thoughts that way? I know Trudeau has encouraged Canadians to cancel all trips to the US.
It is a personal decision. I've seen people cancel trips to Disneyland with the family. I have to, and I've said before that I fill up jerry cans in Blaine in the States and stuff because I have Nexus. I'm like, yeah, I guess I have to buy Canadian and I'll just fill up in Canada. And I guess I'm not going to save the 20%. And but I don't know like,
about that.
The tariffs have delayed 30 days. So I'm like, can I continue doing that? I'm like, would it be un-Canadian of me to do that? Yeah. In the meantime, I still have some items that I pick up on a regular basis that can get shipped to the States. So I'm still going to do that. It's whether I'm going to fill up gas while I'm down there. I guess while the tariffs are still delayed, I guess for this next month, my conscience will be clear that I can still do it and not be a traitor for my country.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We got a bit of a list here. We're not going to read through every single thing, but obviously the big one is finding like the different brands. And I know Heinz and French's, that's like the really big one that for a while was Heinz Canadian back in the day. I can't remember. And then did it become not Canadian? A lot of times, what's the story there?
It starts off at Canadian and they get bought by an American company, right? Like I believe Tim Hortons used to be Canadian, but now they're American owned. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. I feel like everything is pretty much at this point. It's either an Asian or it's the US. And that's where, hey, obviously if there's something, to me, I always go by it of, hey, if the price is similar, maybe it's a little bit more. Hey, I'm going to try and buy local. I would love to just buy local for everything. But sometimes when the price, let's say you're buying an apple and it's $2 to buy, you buy local, it's $7. I'm sorry, I can't do that difference. I like to support my neighbor, but I'm not paying that much more for it.
On Twitter, how everyone's encouraging to buy Canadian. I think Canadians, for the most part, will do that until it makes a difference on their budget. You can only support your country, but if you're suffering financially to support Canada, like my example where I'm saving 20% filling up in the States, like I will do that up until a point if my personal situation is suffering. Yeah, I think a lot of Canadians might feel the same way. Like we can support Canadian up to a certain point and then your personal finances take over and be like, okay.
And again, like we have to put it to like Trump, but it's not like these like American companies are like doing this like to them, like us on person. Like they're not like, oh my God, I want to screw the Canadians. It's the government that's doing it. And really we should be standing up to the government. Like we shouldn't be standing up to like the other things
probably
that
see
way.
This all over social or on Google there, like any Canadian products versus the US brand. So I'll just name a few of them. So let's say, for instance, for cheese and dairy, Kraft. So the Canadian alternatives you can look for is Saputo, Black Diamond, or Armstrong. And a big one is like chips. We like eating chips. Sorry to disclose that. The American ones are Lay's, Doritos, and Cheetos. Canadian equivalent will be like Old Dutch, Hard Bite, Neil Brothers. I haven't actually heard of that, but Old Dutch would be the big one.
Yeah, no, those are the ones that's the ones I usually get anyways. It's like trying to think of like cereal. I don't really buy much cereal anymore. The soups, I don't really buy much soup. Ketchup, I think I've been buying French's for a while. I talked to a couple other people and they can't have French's. Like that is the thing. They're going to buy Heinz ketchup no matter what. And it was funny. We were joking and I was like, oh, what if it turns into a Heinz ketchup gate? No, it's not going to be a toilet. We're not going to have a toilet shortage. It's going to be a ketchup shortage.
The Heinz is American and French's is a Canadian. But if you scroll down and look at this list, the mustard is French's is American. And then, oh my goodness, it's hard to keep up, but I'm sure all the grocers will have these labels and stickers that'll say Canadian made and stuff like that. There's no judgment on, of course we want to support Canadian. Everyone has their own choice on the matter on that stuff. And here's another one, like Starbucks, obviously American. Canadian is Tim Hortons, but really, is it Canadian anymore? It's American owned, but originally Canadian. You can go to a Second Cup or a Waves. There's tons of coffee shops.
I don't really know.
Like JJ Bean Canadian? Yeah. I'm not sure about that. So you're going to have to.
I don't know. I try and go to local now, but honestly, like I like Starbucks coffee, and so if I don't have my local place to go to, I'm like, I'll go to McDonald's too. Like I like McDonald's. I hate Tim Hortons coffee. Like Tim Hortons coffee is just horrible now, and I'm like, I'd rather. It's the ease. Yeah, it's all about the ease. Starbucks makes it super easy.
My wife loves McDonald's coffee, and we all know McDonald's is American.
Yep.
Yes. The beef is Canadian, but it's originally American. Each individual person will be like, where do you draw the line? It's American, but there's Canadian workers there. And if you go to like Home Depot versus Rona, yes, Home Depot is American, but there's people working in Canada. So where do you draw the line? We can try our best, but
I honestly, the other reason why also Starbucks is they don't freaking change, especially if you go through the drive-through. They don't freaking change the menu on you.
Oh,
The
they don't
menu
have the
is there. I can look
digital
at it. I can
screen and
figure out what
everything.
I want. Like when you go to, fuck me. You don't even know what you're ordering. Even when you go into McDonald's now, like it changes the screen every single 5 seconds. You're like, oh shit, do I want that? And they do it, I think, just so people order. I'm just going to order the most basic thing because they're
This is
like,
my biggest pet
I
peeve
can't
with
even have a
Starbucks.
chance to look at this.
Can you just not have small, medium, large, not tall, grande, venti? I'm like, I just want small.
Venti.
So tall, small.
Yeah. Oh god. And it's so funny when you ask them, and I think they like they're trained not to. You know what I freaking want when I say a medium coffee. Don't know what medium means. I don't have to say grande.
We sound like
okay?
old men. They're just complaining about life, how the world's passing us by. We're not up to the times. A lot of people have been commenting on how we feel about tariffs. Everyone's got their own opinion, but a well-respected publication, Wall Street Journal, they put out an article saying the dumbest trade war in history, saying that the 25% tariffs that imposed to Canada and Mexico, really just for no good reason.
And I don't, it's not for economic thing. I really don't think that. You hear all the posts of, did Trump do this to Canada because he's all pissed off at what the Liberals did to him when he came out of power and everything? And I would say it is a power trip. He wants to show that, hey, I have more power than you. And he really could decimate Canada. Like Canada we don't
and Mexico
really have that much power.
The U.S.'s trading partner for a long time. And we've been like essentially good neighbors. So why are you picking a fight with us when usually oftentimes it's traditionally with China and with Russia?
That's the funniest. That's the weirdest one is China got a 10% tariff. And so why does Canada and Mexico get a 25%? And you can't say, okay, Canada's been ripping off the US. China like takes advantage of the US.
I honestly think
way
it's
more.
It's like bullying the little brothers. Because you'll win. Because you'll it goes to show if we go back to the top of our pod that when push comes to shove, when Trump had his proverbial foot on our necks, that's when the Mexican president and Trudeau buckled and said, okay, we'll put troops at the border. We'll do this. We'll do that.
Yeah.
Eventually we're going to cave. And that's what's happened when, really, do you need to do that? There is, hopefully we can get our producer to put this on YouTube on the visual, but there was it's been making the rounds.
Enact it for me,
yes.
Alex.
For those of you on
picture for me, like my eyes are closed.
This. Hopefully, Bernard, you can put this on visual on YouTube or on the visual on Spotify. But a Halifax cartoonist, I guess this would be satire cartoon, right? Oftentimes for articles. He tried to sell it to the news outlets. Yep. No one would buy it, but he shared it on social there. He drew a cartoon describing the U.S. tariffs. He drew a picture of Trump essentially taking a leak in front of a fan that is labeled Canada, and the fan is blowing. And as it's basically depicting the urine coming out, the pee, and coming up and being blown into his face, which sounds pretty accurate, to be honest. I'm like, that's actually pretty darn funny. I'm like, that's about right. What's going on?
Yeah. It affects us for our businesses, but we, the Canadians, we don't really pay for it in our pocket, but up front means we may not have jobs, but it is the U.S. that is actually going to be paying on it.
It has showed us that we need to change our infrastructure in terms of, especially when it comes to refining oil, like we need to stop sending it down to get refined to be bought back. Same thing with the auto industry. Like, why does this need to go up and down? Why can't we just do it? And then it basically shines a light on how inefficient and broken our system is in Canada, how we need to fix it to make it more productive and such.
But again, we've just found things of, okay, Canada's good at doing this. We do it at a better price. The U.S. is better at doing it at this price. So that's why we're always pushing stuff back and forth. That is why Canada, U.S., and Mexico are so intermingled, is because we've been doing that.
So a lot of people have their thoughts about the whole tariff things, and they've made their voices heard. Pro sporting events across the country in the NHL, when there's national anthems, start off in Ottawa, then Calgary, even in Vancouver as well, and then the NBA with the Raptors game, booing the U.S. national anthem. Is it right? Probably not, but Do you blame people? What are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's just so hard. It's going back to, again, like not buying like the American stuff. Again, is it the US? Is it every person
Yeah.
in the US that is doing this? No. You could have a cousin, you could have a sister that lives down there. They're not specifically doing this to us. And again, that's where the anthem is just about your country. I never really understand that stuff. It's, to me,
Yeah,
it's
and I know
not
some
that
people
specific
were
country attacking
like
us.
taking it as far as the American flag is about the veterans and all that stuff, the national anthem, and we're probably taking this back to the Colin Kaepernick kneeling kind of thing. I'm like, no, it's not about that. And I think people who are singing, like the singers who sing the national anthem, when people were booing, I think they pretty much know that the people are not booing the person singing it. They were just booing the state of what's happening with the tariffs. And like my favorite team, the Canucks,
Yeah.
we have a lot of American players
Yeah.
on our team. We're not booing Quinn Hughes or Brock Besser or anything like that. We're booing
Yeah.
the state of what's happening. We're booing your president, essentially. Yeah, is it classy? Probably
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
But we can go back and even say, is singing a national anthem even, do we even need to do it? I think it's only a North American thing. They don't do that in European soccer or any other sport, domestic sport in the world other than North America.
Yeah, I could see it like in certain things, obviously like in November, Remembrance Day, but to me, is that like every single sporting event, is that something
and
like,
I know
do we
Americans
need
are patriotic
to
and
do
stuff.
that?
That's not going to change anytime soon. So
yeah, and we obviously got the other big one, which we talked a little bit on the last pod about, like the government coming out saying that they're deferring the capital gains changes. Come on, this was pretty obvious. Like, this wasn't going to happen. It's being delayed with like a looming election. This is not going to come in. I just don't see any. We got Mark Carney saying that the carbon tax is going away. We're going to, like, I don't know if you've been watching. I just find like they're now spouting every single thing that Pierre Poilievre said before. And it's just so funny how if they've been so against it, how can you just switch instantly? And it's just they were kowtowing to Trudeau, I
we
guess.
knew once government was prorogued that this capital gains change was going to be killed. They're just essentially saving face. Oh, we're going to delay it. I'm like, yeah. And essentially you're just going to delay it and then decide later, oh, we're not going to do it anymore. Yeah, we could have told you that when the time came. That's official now.
Talking to accountants though, like they took money, like CRA has money from people. So what's the process going to be? Get that back? What did people have to pay to their accountants to do this? Like, people panic sold at that time because they were so worried. People don't really understand how capital gains work. I find Canadians, like, I see it all the time, 50% tax. That's not how it works. You're not getting taxed 50%. And so even when we went to that 66%, I did some math for a couple people. If they would have had to pay it, it was going to cost them like $10,000. That was the difference. And we're talking, they're still making $1 million, but hey, it's $10,000 extra they have to pay. But people panic sold because of that. Like, they were worried.
So
holy shit, I got to get this done before June 1st.
But we know it's going to be killed. Those who had to pay the 2/3 will now have to apply for that refund back from CRA. So unfortunately, you're going to have to pay your accountant more and wait more and all that stuff.
Hopefully get your 4% interest rate gain back on it from them.
A few items before we wrap things up here. The city of Vancouver is looking to become a landlord in a new market rental plan. So they are looking to generate some non-tax revenue, starting with a 5-site pilot plan. The first site is on, for those of you in the Lower Mainland, it's Pacific and Hornby in downtown. So they are planning this rezoning in the spring of 2025. So there's going to be 2 buildings, 54 and 40-story buildings, and would provide up to 1,100 plus rental units. So in order to qualify, you need an income of 94 to 190,000. That's considered a median income. I'm like, dang, that's a lot. I'm like, man, even 5-10 years ago, you're doing really well in life. And now that's considered a median income. I'm like, okay, inflation has really changed everything. So this will be city owned. So it's actually a first in Canada, and it's going to likely be managed by a property management company. But the long-term goal of this is to provide long-term non-tax revenue for the city. Well, actually, I'm all for it. So like, rather than having to raise people's property taxes to generate revenue, hey, First time this sounds like the city's trying to be entrepreneurial.
Isn't I feel like in the States they do this more often. Like this, like the villages in the cities in the States like own apartment buildings and they just have way more people living there, but it just makes sense. It's, hey, for one, it's going to be rent controlled, I would hope. I hope that there's like a cap in it of you cannot increase rent X amount that way. I hope there's some oversight that way. Even if someone gets out, I feel like there probably should be like a minimum of.
Yeah, we'll see. I expect it to be still subject to the rental tenancy board and whatever the laws are for BC. We do have a final item. You want to touch on that? Yeah, usually when things are wiped like that, they're trying to hide something because there's more spotlight on it. Lately, politically, we're all looking at why are we wasting government money? Hearing about politicians going on these like vacations and writing it off and expensing it, like $100,000 vacations and expensing it to the city or the province and such. I very well could see that they wipe it and then all of a sudden they clean the info, put everything is back online, and it shows that they spend really prudently. I'm like, that's fishy.
I don't like it. I mean, if we did that, like on our tax books, I mean, we'd be in jail. Like that. Like that's the difference. And so, hey, it's again, we the people have to probably put more recourse when the stuff like that happens.
Sounds good. I think that's about wraps it up. Any closing thoughts?
I hope everyone enjoyed the tariff talk with Alex and Alex.
Yeah, like always, we do appreciate you for tuning in, listening in. We are going through some tumultuous times. We're here to help you navigate it. And thank you for your support all this way. If you like our pod, please follow us and subscribe, share it with your family and friends, and then help us grow our following so we can reach more people to educate. On behalf of Alex Shanks, I'm Alex Pang. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We'll see you next time.
Later. Enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, make sure to follow us. Please give us a 5-star rating. You can even send us an email because we want to know what you guys want to hear about. That's what we're here for. Reach out anytime.